Okay, so is it possible to have artificial general intelligence without consciousness? Or is consciousness required for a general intelligence of any sort? Generalized intelligence, maybe. Hi, my name is Steve, and welcome to Awake with Steve, where I talk about the things that keep me awake at night. Wake me up in the middle of the night, either anxious or just thoughtful about it. So we shall go on from there. The subject of AGI and consciousness came up for me after my last video where I talked about artificial general intelligence. And it was after I had finished that video that I got to thinking about the differences that can exist between humans and artificial general intelligence in computers might be, and in fact probably will be, extreme, because we have been evolved over millions and millions of years. We have learned to deal with our environment. Frequently, that means of dealing with our environment is instinctual, as in it's programmed into us biologically, or it's cultural, because we've just gotten used to everybody around us saying this is the way we should react or deal with situations, or thoughtful. But again, that's just us dealing with it in the context of everything else that exists in the universe. So, but first, a little discussion about where I've been. I started this channel, made some videos, and then it's looking like a few to several months off. As I like to say, life got interesting, which means it got complicated, it got busy, and we're just kind of working our way through those issues now. So I may start this video channel a little bit more in fits and starts, but I certainly want to continue working on it, and it should become a regular feature, or a more regularized feature in the near future, hopefully. So back to the topic. Consciousness. Well, to talk about it in terms of artificial general intelligence, maybe we need to start with a definition of consciousness. In my discussion about AGI, I tend to think of consciousness as the ability to collect data, analyze that data, and project results or draw conclusions from that data. And these are all certainly capable in our current environment. Now, the fact that anyway, in my experience with AI, I ask the questions and AI returns the results. Here's the data, here's my analysis of it, and here's the projections you're asking about it, or the conclusions you're asking about. It's not started by AI. AI just does not ask the first question. So humans are still, as far as I'm aware, the primary driver in what AI does, how it behaves. How is that going to change with AGI? As I got to thinking about my last video and the discussion I had, AGI does not have millions of years of evolution training its material self and its thought processes to react in certain ways, to think in certain ways, to behave in certain ways. That is something that is certainly lacking. Now, can we write into its learning algorithms, its learning data, the capability to absorb that type of those types of experiences, and thereby resulting in an intelligence that is sort of like us. The other option, of course, being that artificial general intelligence is going to be the first alien that we've ever contacted. It'll speak our language. It probably will understand our thought processes better than we understand them, but we won't understand its thought processes. And it will behave in ways that we find strange, unusual, unnerving even, especially in the areas where we think we're being logical. You know, we get in, the first thing that comes to mind is the justice system. We have laws. You obey these laws or there are consequences. Consequences are generally defined. What happens if we take a strictly logical entity and have that entity apply the justice system? I don't think we'll like the results. What we'll find is that our judges and our juries make a lot of emotional exceptions to the law. So, you know, how was that, you know, already just thinking in terms of that, a artificial general intelligence will have a separate set of criteria for passing judgments, for making projections, for analyzing data that is different than we expect, different than we even understand. It'll be a great exercise, I think, in trying to understand artificial general intelligence. It will have one leg up in that we programmed it, and we programmed it with all the information we have about us also. I should say programmed. We educated it. So, defining consciousness. Let's start there. Consciousness, according to the Oxford Dictionary, via Google, of course, that consciousness is the fact of awareness by the mind of itself and the world. That seems to imply that the entity that is conscious actually sees itself as separate from the rest of the world. It's a separate entity. It may be connected in some ways, but it's still, there's a separateness there. So when we add that to my definition, to what was my working definition prior to this, we can understand that we can understand that consciousness arises somehow in an entity that recognizes itself as separate from the world, and sees the world, collects information about the world, and can make predictions about what will happen in the world, make predictions going forward. That's a fairly simple definition of consciousness. Now, the next question is, how does it arise? That's open to debate at this point. We don't know. By some definitions of consciousness, we are unique in that we are conscious. Somehow we can twist these definitions around so that no other creature on this planet is conscious. Something I always find interesting, every time I hear humans saying, but we're special. I keep going through history and going, yeah, we used to say that a lot under a lot of different circumstances, and we're not special under those circumstances anymore. So there are studies going forward where consciousness is scalable, shall we say. So we have human level consciousness, and it's the ultimate on the planet. It's the top dog on the planet, if you will. Some species, elephants, for instance, orangutans, gorillas, can recognize themselves. Elephants do artwork. Crows recognize self. Are they conscious? You know, they certainly can analyze data, make projections. and act on those projections. They know where their food's going to be. They know that there's a probability of food at places. There's 100% here, 50% there. Pros are great at that. They just kind of check things out and then go where they find food. Are octopuses conscious? We have no freaking idea on that one. We know they're extremely smart. They can gather data, analyze it, and make predictions, draw conclusions. I think we're getting to a point now where we can start to communicate with dolphins and whales, maybe, through using AI. I'm not sure how far that research has gotten, but that may give us some insights into how conscious they are if we accept the idea that consciousness is a scalable entity, that some creatures have more, some creatures have less. There are some things that I find interesting. I've got some notes here, of course. A gentleman by the name of Roger Penrose, who's a physicist, been around for quite a long time, well known. He's posited the theory that consciousness is a connection between our brain into the quantum world, and that this connection into the quantum world enables us to be more than just the mechanistic operation of our brain and body. Interesting, I think. He has teamed up with an anesthesiologist, Stuart Hammerhoff, who has seemed to have shown that there are some molecules in the human brain that actually react to quantum stimuli. I'll go into this in a whole different video because it's really, really interesting. I don't think there's generally accepted conclusions at this point that that is the connection for the human brain to create consciousness. It needs a lot more study. Still, it's very, very interesting. And in another realm, just the opposite, if you will, there's a gentleman by the name of Nick Lane, who is actually studying anesthesia, patients under anesthesia. And he's actually looking at the precise biochemical activity that the brain goes through as it slides into non-consciousness of being under anesthesiology. So I find that there's an interesting juxtaposition there, which on the one hand, you've got strictly mechanics. This is just biology. This is the way it works. It goes into this, quantum thing. And from there, we go into mystical rationales. The consciousness is derived from the human soul, and God gave us that soul, or the gods, or aliens, or some other connection into the universe as a whole. Generally, I find a lot of that mystical stuff comes out of we don't know more than anything else. So that's probably best explored in a separate video at this time. Okay. In discussing this and thinking about it, the one thing I find missing, and it kind of comes up from my thoughts on and what I've learned about global warming and the environment in which we live. And that is the ecosystem, the planet, is a complex system. And complex systems are very, very hard to predict. There's a lot of stimuli going on, a lot of positive feedbacks, a lot of negative feedbacks, all kinds of things happening, far, far more than we have been able to understand, let alone model. We're getting better ideas every day, every year, but we have no complete understanding of this complex system. And when it comes to the human brain, I kind of think about it in terms of a complex system also. I don't think there's anybody that would deny the human brain is a complex system. It accepts stimuli from all of our senses. It accepts stimuli from proteins, from hormones. Uh, it just, there's a lot of stuff that affects how the brain operates. And to make it even more complex, it's embedded in a body, which is itself a very complex system. So we have multiple layers of complexity here. And just the fact that we don't understand consciousness almost pulls me into the idea that it is a derivative of a complex brain. If your brain gets so complex, you start getting consciousness. You realize that you're separate from well, I don't know. My first thought was simply because there's stuff that's happening to me that isn't happening out there. Okay, so you can argue that point. Fine. I can argue that point with me. I do sometimes. But if we take it from the aspect of it's a complex system, our consciousness is the result of a complex system. How complex does an entity need to get, a brain need to get, before it gets some measure of consciousness in there? AI systems at this point are not yet approaching the complexity of the human brain. But we will get there. And AGI might be the hallmark of reaching or approaching that level of complexity. And if consciousness is a result of complex systems, then eventually AI will become AGI, will become generalized intelligence. And I find that the interesting part, actually, because at that point, I would be willing to say AGI can start asking its own questions about the universe, about humans, instead of waiting for a human to ask it a question so that it can do its thinking, if you will. AGI will be able to formulate its own questions, do its own research, draw its own conclusions, separate from human beings. Now, getting back to the original question at the beginning of this video, is that a requirement for artificial general intelligence? That it reach a point where it can formulate its own questions, where it understands that it's a separate part. While still being connected, it's separate from humanity. Okay, and the possibility exists, if we go into science fiction, it could even set itself up so that it is actually separate from the hardware that it exists on. Who knows? But is that a requirement that it have a consciousness, enough consciousness, so that it can formulate its own questions regarding humans, regarding the universe? Or is it possible to have artificial general intelligence that simply remains that smart, but its primary driver is still human beings asking it questions? And it becomes just basically, well, the first thought that came to mind is it becomes a pet of ours. And we ask it questions, we ask for its help. I want this research project to kind of, what can we do here, and what kind of conclusions can we draw, and is that valid? And, am I going to get the Nobel Prize for what you did for me? I don't know. Future's rushing up on us. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens here. My first thought is, again, consciousness is a result of a complex system. So it's just a matter of time until artificial general intelligence is conscious. And that is not a state that will be defined by humans. We will discover it. AI will morph into that as we keep giving it more and more capabilities. So I guess with that, I have babbled on far longer than I usually do. So I don't know, we'll take a look at that and see. Maybe I'll split this into two. Probably not, though. It'll just go up this way. So we'll see you. Bye.